and just thank everybody who helped to contribute and provide input to Jane with questionnaires and the various different workshops so that she can roll up all this information for tonight's presentation. So Sandy Hook is on its way. This is a great opportunity for us to keep things moving forward in Sandy Hook. So, thanks.
And thank you for, again, for allowing me and my firm to be a part of Sandy Hook. We've been with you since 2015. 2000, I mean, so it's 15 years. So I just had a little scare. My whole presentation wasn't formatting right, and so so we've got it working. So tonight is going to be the final presentation, and I'm going to be giving you the big overview of the plan. So it's not going to be like we did the other workshops and the presentation that we had about 3 weeks ago, which were more interactive. This is going to be me doing a lot of talking and a lot of slides. So, and at the end, we're going to hopefully have about 15 minutes to just give final input, any little tweaks you need, and then the plan goes to print. So this is the cover sheet. So we're going to review the status and the process that we've been through. We're going to do the presentation of the plan and then the public comment. So that's what I want to explain. This is going to be the print version. So on these pages of massive amount of print, I've highlighted the most important parts for tonight. But this is actually how the plan is going to look. And we did an introduction. What I want to highlight here is that we've gone through a process, Sandy Hook. Very early was settled, almost a year after the town of Newtown was formed. So Sandy Hook's been around a long time with the town of Newtown. The town of Newtown was settled by farmers. Sandy Hook became Sandy Hook because it had the river. The river is running through this whole presentation. And the river was important because they could do grist mills to make lumber. And then eventually when the Industrial Revolution came, it became an important part of our community because rubber came in. And when rubber came in, so did fire hose, belting, and rubberized clothing. And eventually they concentrated just on fire hose and belting. So fire hose is another big important element of Sandy Hook. And then as we went along, a village came to support all the workers that worked in the factories. So churches, post office, businesses, all clustered around what is now Sandy Hook. And those buildings are still there, which is very exciting. And that walkability, which was so popular back in the late 19th century, is still there. So these, including the bridge that was built, the bridge at Dayton Road, in the north part of Sandy Hook Village, 1890 was when that bridge was built. That's pretty exciting. And it's still standing. And you can still walk on it. So those are the kinds of things that we found out about Sandy Hook that were very important. Moving forward, Sandy Hook also has become a huge dining destination with great restaurants. Now a wine bar. He's drinking water though. He doesn't have his license yet.
It's clear water.
And a vineyard up the hill.
A vineyard up the hill.
Yeah.
I don't see the Foundry and Figs representatives because I'm sure they're busy with dinner. But these wonderful restaurants have come into Sandy Hook in the 15 years I've been involved in Sandy Hook. And then of course the tragedy that has greatly impacted the town and the village. And we can't ignore the fact that this tragedy was a huge turning point for all of us. But the opportunities are here, and Sandy Hook is on a 14% growth rate. More than Newtown, more than Southbury. So hopefully Sandy Hook continues to grow. Reason is it's so strategically placed. It's walkable. It has all of these wonderful elements. So although the tragedy was a turning point, it also produced the opportunity for a market and branding study that was completed in 2014. That also is a great asset for the village. And this plan, which is the sign and wayfinding plan for the village of Sandy Hook, or Sandy Hook Village, is a result from that plan and grants that have been received from the town. So I wanted to just give a brief summary of that market brand presentation. I think the first thing that was very interesting is they did a study that basically identified that the biggest market for Sandy Hook currently is Sandy Hook. 46% of the people who visit Sandy Hook are from Sandy Hook. A very small percentage, if you really think about it, since they're so close, about 22% come from Newtown. And then the third biggest visitor is from Southbury. But if you are a tourist, you're from New York State. So that's an interesting little tidbit to know. Not a lot of people from Hartford are coming to Sandy Hook to visit, but people from New York State are. And I think it's because you're coming on 84, you hit exit 10, where it actually says Newtown Sandy Hook, instead of Derby Monroe, which is what exit 11 says. And you get off and you can find your diner, you can find figs, you can find places to eat. You know, there's a liquor store, there's now going to be a wine bar, so this is important. The study also concluded that the largest growth market in the village is dining. So that's interesting to note. And identified other key opportunities in retail, home accessories, specialty grocery and food shops. That's a big hole right now in Sandy Hook that you don't have. Because if you have people living here, Mike, now that we're going to have people really living here, possibly Brian, you're going to need a grocery store for quick in and out, get a quart of milk. You don't want to have to schlep all the way over to a supermarket, you know, that kind of thing. Now, I'm not saying that we want to have a fast type of grocery store, but it would be nice to have a little grocery store that deals in that and specialty foods. And because of these recreational opportunities, maybe some specialty clothing stores and maybe some sporting goods stores, specialty sporting goods stores. And this was identified in this market study. But they also felt that if the growth of Sandy Hook itself at 14%, plus the growth of Newtown and Southbury, was a great deal of market share to grab for the Sandy Hook. So they also felt in this market study that you should really be targeting, as a village, those communities first, before you started to say we are a tourism destination. So to really start at that level and then work your way up. I think that's important to note for the wayfinding plan too. The study also discussed the three-pronged organizational structure, which we feel is very important for the wayfinding plan also, which is the Economic Development Commission, SHOP, and the business and property owners for the town. If you're going to have a successful plan, you need to have those people working in unison. And the study analyzed the visitor customer, and it's interesting that they believe, and I actually talked to the gentleman who did the branding study, how wealthy we are. He couldn't get over how wealthy Sandy Hook is at an average income of just under $100,000. He's never worked in his entire career in such a wealthy community. That was what he said. Usually communities he works in are generally, the median income is around $60,000 to $50,000 in that range. And so for, I said to him, but you know, look at housing costs, you know. But truthfully, we are a high-end community in his view. That's good for retail, that's good for dining, that's good for wine bars. That's the kind of customer you have. Family-oriented, I think that's another key point to understand. Family-oriented. Busy individual, and it has to be a simple, clean, and easy to digest message, okay, for the branding. The symbol they chose, which is the antique street light on the bridge, we've had lots of conversations, and I think you need to revisit that because the majority of people I've talked to do not feel that the antique street light is the appropriate logo, nor a place within us all is the appropriate tagline. And the reason is that everyone I said that to outside of shop, people who worked on that, is immediate, oh, you're talking about the tragedy. So it kind of was not the message I think you want to display to the public. So one person came up with something that I said at a meeting, and everybody's kind of gotten hooked on it. Get hooked on Sandy Hook was something that someone said, and there seemed to be a general interest in that. So I'm not a marketing person or a branding person, but I think there needs to be maybe a little more work on that marketing brand study, just to get you past what was the raw emotions of 2013. But this wayfinding study is a continuation of this, and we will be using many of the elements from that study as we move forward. Wanted to go through our process so you understood. We did numerous site visits and assessments. We did a questionnaire. We did a community workshop back in June. We did interviews throughout the entire process. Up until about a month ago, we were still doing interviews. We did regulation research from local and from the state and from the federal government. Okay. We did sign research, digital research, second community workshop. We did that in July. More site visits, more interviews, more research, and we did our semifinal presentation about 4 weeks ago. And today is the final presentation. So this has been the process we've gone through, which has been pretty extensive. And on the whole, we've had a nice, this has been about the number we've had at each of the presentations. And some of you are new faces, so we've had an interesting mix of people. I think the biggest attendance was that first presentation at the first workshop. I'm going to go through these wayfinding because this is important for the study foundationally, and when you get the study, this would be important for you to read, because it's what is wayfinding. Because I think it's important to understand that wayfinding is an experience and signage is a tool. So although this is the sign and wayfinding plan, wayfinding is more the umbrella and sign is one of the tools we use. Okay? It's an important tool in a community's economic development toolbox. It is not the silver bullet. It's just one of the tools in your tool chest. There's many other things you should be doing besides this. So I want to have your expectations real, that if you put a sign up, people aren't going to just come flying off of 84 coming to the village, okay? But it's important that if they do come off of 84, that they get to a sign where they know where they're going. So it's a little bit of just one part of what you should be doing and continue to do as the village continues to grow. So the 4 stages of, and we've seen this slide before, so excuse me for showing it again, but I don't think we can repeat it enough. The 4 stages of wayfinding is first orientation. You've got to get them oriented as where they want and go. They have to make a decision on how they're going to get there, the route decision. They need to understand that when they're on that route, that they are on the right route. And they need to understand that when they get there, they've gotten there. Sounded like a Yogi Berra. That was in honor of Yogi. A wayfinding system is comprised of several things, all of these being included, signs being one of them. So signs are an important part of wayfinding, but so are linked and complementary experiences. In other words, you're not going to get people to come if they're only going to do one thing. They want to go hiking, but they also may want to have lunch. They may want to go buy hiking boots. They may want to get trail mix. You have to link the experiences, okay? They may want to go to a concert and then go for dinner. So you have to think of how do you link these things so that people come and do a number of things at once, not just go to one thing, get in their car and never walk the village. Hierarchy of elements. You don't want everything to be the same size. You don't want everything to be the same. You don't want a lot of clutter. You want to make sure that as they're moving along, it gets to the scale of where they are as a pedestrian. So you want a hierarchy of the sizes, hierarchy of the importance. You want to make sure you create an edge so that people know they arrived. It shouldn't be just a bleed, it should be an edge. And you have already done that pretty effectively with your streetscape. We have done that pretty effectively with your streetscape. I think we can do a little more, and I think that's something we'll be discussing tonight. There should be direction and trailblazing. We're going to discuss that a lot. And not only for the vehicle, but also for the pedestrian. There's no direction and trailblazing for the pedestrian right now. Education is a huge, important element of any wayfinding, because if people understand the municipality's history and assets, its history, its environmental assets, its recreational assets, then they may want to come back. Okay? If all they do is get off the highway and see a diner, they may not want to come back, or they'll just go to the diner. You want the direction and trailblazing for the vehicle to be able to get back to the highway. This is a very important thing, because if they're frustrated getting back to the highway, that's the last thing they remember of the visit to your community. So you want to make sure they know how to get back to the highway, and that they felt like you guys were grateful that they came. We want opportunities for expansion of the wayfinding system. Links to digital application has become huge, huge. It's very important that we're linking this. The millennials do not do what we boomers did. The millennials have a totally different point of view, and they are coming into their 30s. Scary. And we are going into the other side. You also want an implementation strategy and a maintenance strategy. Implementation would include funding. Maintenance will include how you take care of this long term, because there's nothing worse than going to a community and finding rusty signs and things not looking well kept, plantings full of weeds, etc. Then it doesn't look like you care about the community, so why should I bother to come back? So the elements that we're going to have discussed are gateways, vehicular wayfinding, pedestrian wayfinding, destination identity, community identity, and media and print support. So those are the things we're going to discuss. This I'm not going to get into in great detail, but this is basically the sequence of how people start their wayfinding. And all the research has shown they start now with the web. Start with the web. Now, Shop has redone admirably your website. Good website. Great website, not yet, but good website. Town of Newtown, you need help. Sorry. Website isn't compelling about the town. Now, there's also the chamber website. Needs a lot more help. Okay? So that's something that. And then the last thing that happens when people leave is a digital application where you get a push. You ever get that? Where, how did they know I was eating at Figs? Where all of a sudden your GPS says, rate Figs, rate the Foundry. You know? So it's amazing now, but they'll push for you to rate it, and that's a good way to get more search engine optimization as people rate things. TripAdvisor, Expedia, etc. So the first and last thing that happens in the wayfinding sequence, due to research, is digital. In between, there's a lot of traditional. And then we talk about the sign family. The limited access highway signs, which we have very little. We spent almost a whole community workshop on this. Logo signs, all the different DOT signs, all the requirements. Okay? That was a boring workshop, but it was something that, I mean, everybody was riveted because they really didn't realize, nor did I, how much regulation is in this signage. all the way through gateways, etc., down to banners, flowers, and streetlight decorations. All of these things are important, and they should all be related to your brand and what message you want to relate to the visitor, to the potential customer, etc. And this is just some examples through the, you've seen all these pictures, but I just kind of brought them together. Gateway, direction sign, kiosks. These are interpretive signs, museum on the streets, recreational signage, and I think this banner works for us. I like that banner, by the way. It's pink and purple. But because of its triangular shape. Then we talked about, and you've seen all of this too, digital wayfinding. There's apps, there's QR codes. You just take a scan of it and up comes all the information about the place. QR codes are very important to include on all of your interpretive and pedestrian map, kiosk, directory signage. Because a millennial, and now maybe this boomer, will go up and take a scan of it and up comes all the information on your phone. And then you can go do your hike. It was really like amazing to me. You could do your hike with your phone. You know, it was great. And then there's also all the Google products. There's tons of Google products that you can relate to and get on and really, so digital is something we need to really talk about. All right, let's talk about your current wayfinding conditions in Sandy Hook Village. First of all, there's a ramp sign at exit 10 off of 84, but there's no signage at exit 11 at all that says Sandy Hook at all. It doesn't even say Newtown at all. It says Derby, Monroe, New Haven, Bridgeport, but nothing says Sandy Hook or Newtown. Okay, maybe that's why the people from Hartford, they don't know. I don't know. There's a small DOT directional sign at exit 10. If you miss it, you miss it, because when you get to the intersection, the only thing that directional that is there is, it says Route 6 that way. That's it. So you don't know, if you've missed it, you don't know where Sandy Hook is. You have great, you have some small DOT gateway signs at Washington Ave and Glen Road. Those are the little Sandy Hook green signs. Yeah, those. You have a great street layout. That is what you have that Newtown doesn't have. And that is, you have a strong spine, Churchill Road. You've got 4 strong corners, all connected. I mean, Sandy Hook is a perfect village in that respect. All walkable. There isn't one part of it that isn't walkable. Relatively flat, in Connecticut terms. Maybe not Florida terms, but in Connecticut terms. And a good 4 corners now, after the taking out of the utility pole in the middle of the road. You do have an iconic element. We talked about that quite extensively, and we'll talk about that further on, but right now you have some holiday trees at the 4 corners. You have good destinations. Some of them are not so known, particularly Al's Trail, which is pretty well hidden. The vineyard is pretty well hidden. In fact, if you go on the Google the vineyard, the biggest criticism of the vineyard is it was horrible to get there and I couldn't get out because there's no signage. Is that correct?
That's secret in Fairfield County.
Yeah, it's best kept. But when they got there, they were like awe-inspired by the property. And actually, you weren't there that day, but I did go. I am bummed too. I was bummed. It was one of those impromptu things. I actually ate lunch on the bridge too. That was neat. The 1890 bridge. This guy came walking his dog and he's like looking at me like, is she crazy? But that is such a beautiful view of the river there. It's like, it's just charming. You have great businesses. Even the laundry is a great business. I mean, you know, you wouldn't think of laundry, but I mean, it's just a beautiful laundry. I mean, most laundries are not. You know, no offense, but you have a beautiful laundry. You know? And from what I understand, people from Southbury come to do their laundry. So let's get them to eat and go to the wine bar. Maybe you could have a wine and laundry. It's right across the pedestrian bridge. You also have many current events. I understand from an email that the concert wasn't very well attended. Was
No.
the next concert well attended?
The second one was a little better than the first, and it looks like the third one's gonna have a rain problem. And
Yeah.
I think, there were emails going back and forth today that I missed most of because I was working, but I think we're trying to reschedule it to someplace inside. No, we're not gonna postpone it, we're gonna have it somewhere inside. It's unfortunately not gonna be in San Diego. The latest I heard was Congregational Church.
Yeah.
Because the sponsor is already, with the rain date, it's hard to come up with another date. There's lots of
Yeah,
reasons that we wanna try and have it, but, so I
Well,
think right now it's
I've talked to
Congregational
a few
Church.
of my people that, like I have some, this kind of group that I call outside of the village to say, okay, what do you think? And they said Saturday in the middle of the day, not good.
Yeah, the problem we have is the spot, we can't compete with the restaurant. If we
Yeah.
have it any time other than 1 and 3 on a Saturday, then they would take away Foundry's parking, and they get upset, so we had to try and
Well, that is
squeeze them in.
something we'll be
We had
talking,
to try to squeeze them in
yeah.
between,
I think that's something we'll be talking
yeah.
about. Okay. So here's some pictures. This shows that little Newtown Sandy Hook sign that if you blow by it, by the time you get to the intersection, you don't see it. Then there's nothing really over here by the other exit of exit 10. Exit 11, here's the sign, Wasserman Way, Derby, Monroe, and New Haven. Pretty amazing. And then when you get to Wasserman Way in Berkshire, there's 34, nothing else. You don't know. Here's Churchill Road, here's the beginning, here's some of the streetscape from phase 1. Now this is kind of out in the middle of nowhere with the hope that eventually the streetscape will come up to meet it, but there's a little gateway there with no planting. It kind of looks a little odd because it's just sitting there in the middle. Yeah, I think it needs to be rethought out.
Gonna put it on the other side?
You also, but I think it's important to note that you also have these other two roads, Glen Road being the more heavily traveled, Riverside Road. Actually, last time we were talking about it, I drove all the way, I never had driven, all these years, I'd never driven up Riverside Road. Finally took that drive and hit an Italian restaurant in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It was like, okay. And that was kind of neat, because I guess the restaurant must be on the river, I guess. I didn't get out and it was closed, I didn't get up there, go there. It's kind of, it's by appointment? Uh-huh.
Renaissance.
And then, like I said, very strong four corners which have been strengthened by the streetscape. I mean, if you recall what it looked like, 10 years ago, well, even 5 years ago, this is huge improvement with the walls, the plantings, the lights, etc. This is pictures that, I'm sorry if I'm offending any property owners, but your biggest asset is the river, and yet we have lined the river with the utilitarian stuff that is not conducive to creating a really beautiful riverbank, because this is the best view that we had of the riverbank. You can see how pretty it is. And in this area, which is right near the foundry, you also have the sound, which is also important when you're dining. But at some point you look across at the backs of cars, dumpsters. Here's the Susan Komen clothing drop. And then of course we have this lovely pedestrian bridge, but really no clear access to it. Cars on both sides. You go on one side, you end up in someone's pedestrian door at Sabrina's, At one time that pedestrian bridge connected to the post office line. That was even before me, so it made a lot of sense. I think it could make a lot of sense again, but we have to think about that.
Now it's gonna have a wine bar on the other side.
That's right.
We talked about building signs. I think
Don't drink and drive, walk.
this is taken from your driveway, Mike.
The lower driveway is?
Yeah, you can see I can't read that. I can't read this. I can't read that. If I'm in a car, I'm not reading any of that. So the big asset to one of these signs is this. Because remember, what was the first thing they did? They went on the web, and then the next thing they did
Address,
was get in their GPS. So if you don't have the address clearly identified, that's really a hardship for your building. Not the case, 15 years ago, but is the case now. I think all of, this sign too, it's kind of sad that it's just this, almost looks like a no parking sign that someone rigged up to be a sign for a business. The juice bar got a new sign though, did we see that?
Yes.
Yes, we worked hard to get her a sign, didn't we? We did. And then of course, a lot of, I don't know, George, is this legal? This is too much signage, what they call sign clutter.
Don't ask him that.
And then some eclectic signs. I think the neat thing about Sandy Hook is that it has some of these eclectic signs, and that's what makes it unique and interesting. I think if every sign was white with black letters, it would be boring. I think that the opportunity to make your signs eclectic, that some of them are coming out from the buildings, etc., makes Sandy Hook unique and interesting. There's some recreational signage. I had to kind of find these signs in my hiking boots, kind of weed-whacking my way through. And this is really what's sad. This is the Glen Road end of that pedestrian bridge. Do you really expect people to use that? So that is a wayfinding, again, not sign, but wayfinding. Clean, neat, well cared for. And it's not clean, neat, or well cared for.
That's not the pedestrian bridge.
That is the pedestrian bridge at Dayton Road.
Oh.
Dayton Road.
That's fine.
Yeah. That's the trailhead for Alice Trail. Okay. Which is this. That's the one sign that if you go to the church, you actually have to look over the fence because there's no sign on the fence. And the fence is bungee cord closed. Okay. And then this is
Where are you, Jane?
This is at the back of the Methodist Church is the trailhead right next to the playground. The reason they have to bungee cord close the fence is because the kids are not allowed to get to the river. That really needs to be rethought. Okay, it's an issue because Alice Trail is a huge asset.
Yeah, we're working on it.
Huge asset for Sandy Hook. It's the only place along that 11 miles that you could get into a village and buy yourself water. You could get something to eat. You could get a glass of wine. After I've hiked 11 miles, I'm having a glass of wine. Okay. And then this is the other end of Alice Trail by the pedestrian bridge. Here's the dedication plate for the pedestrian bridge. It's high up. If you look at it close, it tells you who the first selectman was in 1890. It is cool. It is really cool. We need to make that bridge more special. It's really a neat bridge. And it's wide enough that you could put benches there so people could actually sit there in the middle of the river and have their lunch or have a cup of coffee. It's a wonderful bridge.
Who owns the property on the other side of that bridge?
I don't know. There is this is the access right here to Rocky Glen State Park and the Alice Trail at that end. And there's a kiosk here. It looks to me like this is Rocky Glen State Park, so it probably is owned by the state. I do know that the neighborhood uses it as their cul-de-sac.
Right.
That neighborhood was probably the houses of the factory workers at one point. But right now they use it as their turnaround and somewhat their leaf dumping ground and so forth. So it's not very attractive, and you do feel a little, as a woman alone especially, I was felt a little creeped out. I felt very creeped out over here and here by the church because you go into this and it's just really overgrown with weeds. I think the problem with the Alice Trail is that it's not well publicized. There's some issues because it's some just agreement, not easements. But I think for Newtown and for Sandy Hook to have an 11-mile greenway is a huge economic development engine. We talked about Millerton. You went up to Millerton. You saw how that horrible little town, I mean, 20 years ago that town was just boarded up and run down, and it's transformed because of the rail trail. So greenways and trails and big thing now with bicycles is off-road cycling. And Sandy Hook Bicycle is a big promoter of Grapes of Wrath and also many mountain bike events. In fact, I guess they have a very strong core of mountain bikers. Another resource for Sandy Hook, and another thing millennials love to do. I'm a cyclist, so I get to ride with all these 30 and unders. But I gotta say, that is huge. And they have a cyclocross race at Fairfield Hills. It's just a hip, skip, and a jump. Hop, skip, and a jump.
And a jump.
It's what?
The problem with Fairfield Hills is there's so many walkers with dogs not on tight leashes, so it's almost dangerous to ride your bike on that path.
Is it really?
Yeah. And people don't understand when you're saying passing on the left, they jump to the left. It's very dangerous.
Well, that's what I'm saying is Al's Trail and the Newtown Trailway, I think it's called,
Yeah.
but it has two names. I think really needs not only Sandy Hook Village, but the town of Newtown to really look at as a quality of life asset that can drive economic development. It's true, because that's what they're looking for. The river is the second thing. Someone here said fishermen don't spend money. Yeah, where is Wes? Wes could
That's
be.
not a definite thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Wes was our fisherman too. But I spoke to Jim, right, Jim Bell?
Oh, Bell, yeah.
Belton,
From,
yeah.
And
Charlton.
Trout Unlimited.
Okay.
Who knew that we had this like really great trout stream right in the middle of Sandy Hook? So this is not something small. So you have fishing, hiking, and bicycling. Okay. Plus everybody, when I showed these pictures to City Center, the lady who used to be the executive director of City Center and the woman who is the executive director for the Western Connecticut Cultural Alliance of the river, remember? They were like, oh my God,
River versus
we would give anything to have that in Danbury, anything. So this is good stuff. But we also have warning signs. If you can see here, it does say welcome, but absolutely prohibited. Parking only.
Where is that?
That's Mr. Porco's property. All over Mr. Porco's property. It's not just one, there's probably several.
And so are the danger keep up.
And there's reasons. He's had some insurance issues.
Of course.
This one especially, danger keep off the fence, is on every single fence post.
No.
Yeah.
Yes. So we really need to convince our property owners that there's a way to say warning that makes the visitor feel like you're concerned about their safety more than you don't want them to be there. Also, no restaurant parking. That's a big issue in Sandy Hook Village. And then Mike, I couldn't resist, this is all customer parking, but I think that's a good thing. And we'll be discussing that later. Okay? But there's all sorts of signs all over Salem. I mean, this is just a smattering. We had a meeting, the first workshop, where we really dealt at some of the property owners
I
said,
knew it was your program. I couldn't-
I'm bleeding, you're hurting.
We need to sign this as welcome.
Yes. Now, I want to talk about this because this is your digital presence. I did this today. I had done it in June, and I did it again today. This is how we Google Sandy Hook. If you Google Sandy Hook, your message is this.
Yep.
If we Google Sandy Hook Village, your message is this. How do we get this message over here? Because very few people will Google Sandy Hook Village. And that is beyond the scope of my plan. So we are recommending you get someone in here who understands search engine optimization so that when people Google Sandy Hook, we don't get this. Okay? Because that's going to be something that people aren't going to want to see. I'm not going to go into these maps, and everybody's going to go, so, thank God, in great detail. But these maps are the plan. Okay? And the reason I'm not going to go into great detail is because this is showing exactly where all the existing wayfinding conditions are right now. So we did a complete inventory of every wayfinding sign, not every sign, but every wayfinding sign. That was from, and in this case, exit 10, exit 11. And this is exit 11. So we identified all the DOT signs, the directional signs, this is institutional sign, the gateway signs, some ramp signs, etc. And then the same in exit 11, all the directional signs, there's actually a park and ride there, so parking signs. And what we did was we actually created a schedule. So this is going to have everything as of September 30th, well actually, August of 2015 was when we did the final inventory. We used various methods. Most of it was on boots on the ground, but we used Google where we felt boots on the ground wasn't practical, which like I-84. Not going to walk, no matter how much you pay me, not going to walk on 84. And then we did the same thing for the village. We actually did it for all the signs in the village that were indicative of wayfinding, including the sandwich sign that says pedestrian crossing, because frankly that is a gateway sign. Whenever you people see pedestrian crossing signs, they feel they are coming to a place. Because you don't put pedestrian crossing signs in the middle of nowhere. And again, that's the schedule. But we did an analysis too. So, the real problem is you have no clear direction to the village from I-84. There are some logo signs on I-84, but it says the Sandy Hook, the Blue Colony Diner and the Subway. It's the Blue Colony Diner and Subway. Okay? Streetscape provides an identity to the village, but ends abruptly at Washington Avenue and Glen Road. So it's just kind of like stop there. I think we all know that there's an understanding that eventually we're going to extend it, but you know, the visitor doesn't know that. Limited identification of dining destinations and shops in the village. There is nothing that says dining or shops or anything. And certainly not on 84, because unless you want to go to Subway, that's the only thing that's indicated on that logo sign. Okay? And when you get off of exit 10, it says Subway that way. The diner decided not to pay for that logo sign because they're right there.
Right.
It's that diner, not the Sandy Hook diner, it's the Blue Colony. No identification of recreational assets in the village at all. If you're in the village, you do not know there's an Al's Trail. You barely know there's a river. Okay. Limited identification of the historical assets. I mean, really, you have incredible historical assets in this village, and there's no indication of any of them around. The buildings, the whole history of the fire hose, I think that's rather compelling. No way to know where to park. People really don't know where to park and whether they should park there, and when they get there, there's signs that says they're going to be towed. You know, parking, huge issue. Somewhat intimidating warning signs, which we've discussed. Building signs that have some limitations in effectiveness, I think mainly because of regulations, but you know, you put everybody's business on that sign and the letters are this, anything less than 3 inches, and actually in my opinion 4 inches, you can't read it from a vehicle. Okay, so you're not going to see someone's insurance company on that little tiny sign. Pedestrian, that's fine, but vehicle not. So I think there has to be a better understanding in the sign regulations and with the business owners and property owners themselves that the most important thing from a vehicle is the address, and that the pedestrian will, once they get out of the car, they'll need to know where to get to the business. And we have to let the business owners just know, understand that. There's no gateway on Glen Road at all, which is the main access from Southbury. There's just that one little green sign that says Sandy Hook. And that's an important access, seeing that, you know, remember we said third in the list is Southbury, and that's the way they come. They're not getting on 84 to come to you. They're coming the back way. Everybody comes the back way. Well, the bridge has been under construction, but once the bridge is finished, they'll continue to come the back way. No gateway on Riverside Road, I think that's a minor issue because I don't think a lot of people are coming to Sandy Hook through through Riverside Road particularly. River has been blocked, we discussed that, and then we discussed the digital presence is limited. Okay, again, this is more for you to read at your leisure. I think the most important thing is that we did a pretty extensive community outreach and we got some really great information, which we'll put in these conclusions. Okay. Conclusions is that, number one, on all the interviews and all the questionnaires, expand the streetscape. Number two, promote the walking village, therefore pedestrian signs and maps. There are none now, they all felt that was important. Number three, they feel that they want a brand and they want to promote it, that they are different than the town of Newtown. They're unique and interesting. They want direct people from Newtown and I-84 eastbound. That seems to be the most, exit 10 is the most important exit, they felt. They want to educate people about the Sandy Hook historical environmental assets. Everybody's proud of them, but nobody knows about them, except the people who've lived here for years. Emphasize the dining and wine experience. They're proud of the fact that this is becoming a growth industry in the town. Welcome the visitors. And someone capitalized that, so I decided to capitalize that on their questionnaire. They put welcome, because most people don't feel very welcome when they get here. You can't park your car, it's huge. If you feel you can't park your car, it's huge. Promote the community and cultural activities, promote the recreational assets. The digital access, I didn't agree it should be this low, but this is where it ended up. I personally think digital needs to be up top, but I think a lot of the people that were answering the questionnaire are in my age bracket, and if I had gone to 30-year-olds and 20-year-olds, that might be the first thing.
So are these hierarchical?
Yes. And then address the parking, traffic, and speeding issues. I think mainly because they felt in a signage, they were thinking signs. Not so much. So, but I think as we move along, we're going to find that the parking has become a bigger issue.
Hey, Jane, can you
Yeah.
just go back for a second there? If those are hierarchical, I think the map's upside down because, well, I agree with expanded streetscape, but the parking, traffic, and speeding issue I think is huge.
I do too.
And
I do too.
I think all three can be addressed with, or partially addressed, at least with on-street parking.
Yeah.
It's a calming, it's a calming thing, it gives us more parking spots and just sort of slows the traffic down.
I think it's because the way we, and this is the fault of the questionnaire was geared more towards signage and not so much towards those issues. These were in comments below, and I didn't have a lot of them, but as we went through the interviews, we got a little more of that. But if I took everything, this was the hierarchy.
I would cluster them in like groups. I think you have 3 discrete groups and
Okay.
they're probably equally important.
We could do that, definitely.
Some are technical and others are, and look at, like in the middle there, the welcoming, promoting cultural events, promoting the recreation.
Yeah,
assets.
that's all,
Those all speak to a certain kind of behavior.
right.
So I think they can be clustered and
Good.
emphasized that way.
Yeah, we can
I
make
don't
that.
want a competition among ideas.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
I understand. I think that's a great idea. So we also looked at the physical challenges and opportunities. So that's the map, and you can see it in the plan and study it. But I've also summarized it. Everything has challenges. There is nothing perfect. One of the big challenges you have for signage and gateways at exit 10 is topography. Both exit east and westbound have major large drop-offs. So to put in certain kinds of gateways you can't do it without an enormous amount of earthwork and maybe easements to the private property owners adjacent to it. So that's a challenge. The DOT signs at exits do not direct to the village, that's a challenge. Because how do we get DOT? They're not going to change exit 11 signs to say Sandy Hook and Newtown. They're just not going to do it. You know, how do we get that? So that's not something we're going to get DOT to do. Parking is an issue that needs further study. The current condition of the Poochok Riverbank is a huge challenge. The lack of identity of recreational assets is a challenge. The tragedy is a challenge, which I think we really need to talk about, but not in this study. The study can't really talk about that, but we are going to give you some recommendations. I-84 separates the village from the rest of Newtown. That's perception. I mean, you can cross over the bridge and you can go under the underpass, but it's the same problem in Danbury and it's the same problem in all towns that have been bisected by 84. Why? It's just the way it is. In fact, they call north of I-84 in Danbury, Danfield. It's Danbury and Ridgefield put together. And traffic and speeding. I think the opportunities are you have a streetscape already, and the potential sidewalk connections across I-84 to the borough have already been started. So I think that's a huge opportunity. The river, even though it's a challenge, it's still a huge opportunity. The trails, even though they're a challenge, there's still opportunity. Shop in the community, huge opportunity there. That you already have an organization in place and a community. I wish this room was 100 people. I really do. But I think timing of these meetings has always been a challenge. And it's not like wayfinding and, am I going to go to a sign and wayfinding study? You know, how sexy does that sound?
Should have wine.
Should have wine. Dining establishments. I mean, the historic architecture of the village, huge opportunity. The interesting connection with the fire hose, a huge opportunity. Walkable configuration. Anyone who is developing now knows that one of the biggest things is walkable community. Am I right? The events and the brownfield property, huge opportunity. It's a challenge too, but it's a huge opportunity. Okay, sorry this is so small, but I put it in green. So these are our recommendations based on all of that information. First recommendation, extend the streetscape. We're going to develop a sign suite that incorporates the market and branding study. We're going to develop a wayfinding that supports the vehicular visitor, improve the digital access. We want to assist the business owners in obtaining logo signs on 84. Okay, that's a huge thing because it's a very expensive, very tedious process, and I don't think a business owner can do that by themselves. Subway is a different subject. You know, they're a big corporation, and the diner is a big enterprise. But a smaller enterprise is going to have a hard time doing that. And Sandy Hook Village is basically smaller enterprises.
You may have covered this, but can you do Sandy Hook Village as a sign, and there has to be a particular?
And they have to have a public restroom, and they have to be within so many feet. And if someone comes that's closer, you get kicked off the sign. We went through all of this.
Yeah, no, it's coming back to me.
We want to install at exit 10 a new Sandy Hook Village Newtown directional sign. At Walnut Tree Hill, we want a gateway. As you get off of exit 10, I think the gateway needs to be moved there. It's too far into the village. Okay. We want to adopt a ramp sign for Sandy Hook Village at exit 11 because right now there is not an adopt a ramp sign. And we can grab that one for Sandy Hook Village because exit 10 is Newtown. We want a Sandy Hook Village gateway sign at exit 11. Some people want it to also say Newtown. I mean, Fairfield Hills is there, but it's not really the borough. I don't know. That's something you guys can discuss as to whether you want to add that on. We want a Sandy Hook direction sign at the intersection of Wasserman Way and Berkshire Road. We're recommending that the existing Sandy Hook Village sign at Pearl Street be improved, maybe even relocated. We'll install Sandy Hook Village gateway sign at Walnut Tree Hill Road and Glen Road for the Southbury people, so that as soon as they get over the bridge, they're there. We want Sandy Hook Village trailblazing signs on Glen Road. We want Owls Trail and Rocky Glen State Park direction signs on Glen Road and Churchill Road. We want to install Sandy Hook Village parking direction signs for private parking and municipal parking. That's something we're going to be discussing in depth. Install a Welcome to Sandy Hook Village sign right here at the firehouse. We talked about that last time. That was where everyone felt it was the most effective. Want to install streetlight pole decorations, complementary commercial building signage. We want to also develop the wayfinding that supports the pedestrian visitor. We're going to get in that more depth with Sandy Hook Village direction signs and kiosks and an icon element that promotes the whole idea of the fire hose in Sandy Hook. Recreational markers for Owl's Trail, interpretive signs with QR codes. We really feel you should look into the museum on the streets. We think you would qualify, and I think the town historian agrees with us.
Dan Prusen, we talked to him. Yeah, he did the one in Danbury, I think.
Yes, he did. And frankly, I think Sandy Hook Village has more compelling history. Install new recreational gateways for Owl's Trail. In other words, instead of the weed-infested pedestrian bridge, maybe we could make that look a little nicer. Encourage property owners to install welcoming directory signs, and encourage property owners to maintain their entire properties, including the rear that are facing the river. Because right now there's some pink peeling, rusty, not yours, rusty, give me the look.
We know who you're talking about.
He's not here.
Okay, so here's the again, the plan. I think I'll get into this a little more. Here's those directional signs off of exit 10 ramps. Gateway sign by Walnut Tree Hill. Gateway sign by Pearl Street. Sorry for the scale of these things, this is huge scale. We're at exit 11 now. And adopt the ramp sign, a gateway sign as soon as you get off, a directional sign at this intersection, and a trailblazer before you go under the 84. Mainly because you get to that point, you're like, where am I? You know, you really feel that way. You've gone past the Newtown High School and you've gone past all these businesses, and then you're kind of like out in the middle of nowhere again, and you're going through a tunnel. So we want something to say, yeah, you're going in the right direction, keep going. And here's the schedule. When you get into the Sandy Hook Village, we want to actually do some recreational signage just here at Dayton Road, because here's Owl's Trail, and Owl's Trail also is the back of the church. Want to improve that little gateway, get some parking signs, banners all along Church Hill. We want to have, this is all vehicular, this is not pedestrian yet. We want to have at the intersection a directional sign for Sandy Hook at that intersection, and a trailblazer sign for the vineyard. The reason I feel that's important is because right now, the trailblazing takes you up Walnut Tree Hill through this very convoluted way to get to the vineyard. The easiest way to get to the vineyard is to drive through the village, make a left on Glen Road and a left on Walnut Tree, and it's right there on your right. But the other thing is that then you also have all these people who are going to the vineyard driving through the village. We also want to get GPS to get that together. We want to get Google to get that together. That's the whole idea of linking everything. Because when they go to the village, they may actually see the sign for the wine bar. So they'll go drink up the hill, and then hopefully the designated driver will take them to the wine bar. Yes, Joseph?
One of the problems is going to be where you started out, though, with the apps and the digital and GPS and everything, because Walnut Tree goes all the way around the loop. So somebody's coming off 84 and GPS, it's going to tell them to take that first left on the Walnut Tree instead of sending them into the village.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is, when we talked about getting that expert person who can do a search engine optimization and so forth, we also need to have that person work, or a consultancy work, on how do you change the route, so that when they get off the highway, they're told to go through the village and make the left. Also, the vineyard should be putting those directions on their website. Did you hear me? The vineyard should be putting those directions. Go down Churchill Road, make a left on Glen, and up Walnut Tree.
That's the way I tell them.
Yeah. Okay. We're also doing some more banner signs, some more recreational signage, some directional signs. These two are here only because our map doesn't go far enough. This is the gateway and trailblazing sign for the vineyard over by Walnut Tree Hill. We need some more banner signs going up Riverside Road, some parking signs. I don't know if the senior center parking is all that available for the village, but if there was an event, you may want that as overflow parking, so you may want to show that. firehouse, I don't know if the firehouse wants parking. I know there's a parking lot behind here with some recreation. Again, that's far from the, it's a little far from the village, but again, it could be overflow
The firehouse.
parking.
The firehouse does want parking, but they also want a sidewalk to get to the parking place.
We also talked about the school, whether or not the school was, and maybe you can answer this question, you weren't here, you had to leave early, whether or not the school is going to have a sign, because it used to have a sign.
It will have a sign.
And is it going to be in the same location? Is it going to be the same sign or a different sign?
It will be a different sign, and we're not certain of the location yet.
Okay, okay, I'm not showing it on this plan. I don't know if that's important to the plan at this point. And then we also feel there's two, this is the schedule of those signs, and then we also feel that this is the pedestrian plan. So you're gonna have the vehicular signage, that's the vehicular wayfinding for the village, and then the pedestrian wayfinding. The pedestrian wayfinding emphasizes, again, direction. So the direction is kiosks, directional signs, kiosks over by Al's Trail, by the Four Corners. I feel a kiosk on either side of the river, so Mike, maybe near the liquor store, we could even hide those electrical boxes with that kiosk that we chose. And then we all agreed that, and we have to talk to Bob in more detail, but I'm going to let you guys do that, that the Newtown Forest Association Plaza, and we think that we should dedicate that kiosk to Julia Wasserman. So that because she was such an important part of the community. And then an icon right here, we're going to introduce that icon in a minute. Some of you know what it is. Interpretive signs, some on the bridge, all along the river. And then recreational wayfinding signs and maybe pavement markers to show where Al's Trail is, because right now you really don't know. And we really want to make that something important. So here's the schedule. So now we come into the actual signs. This is one of the gateway signs. This is a 2-post gateway sign. We're using the hook as part of our arrow, and we think that should be in gold. We're using the Sandy Hook Village from the branding study. Here's the light. Although one of our comments was if you're going to use the light for your logo, you may want to go repair and clean the lights because they are in very bad shape. So,
And
Two of them just got burned up in a car fire somewhere.
oh no.
Yeah.
Replaced.
So maybe we replace those? Yeah. I don't know if you can. How
Well,
old
not with one exactly like that, we can't definitely. But maybe something closer to the post lights.
And then this is a small directional sign. Okay, again, we decided that dining should go on the top and shops should go on the bottom. You're only allowed to have 3 things hanging from the bottom of the sign, so we decided it would be dining shops with an arrow.
That's because it's on state land.
It's also the, we have to follow the remember that code, I'm drawing a blank, begins with an M, it's the federal code.
Okay.
Yeah, for signage, so. This is where we think the exit 10, instead of trying to make a major gateway, when you get exit 10, we use the street light, because you're gonna have streetscape there anyway, so we'll put a light there. And then we'll hang historic Newtown.
Sorry.
Historic Newtown with, and Historic Newtown, when they do their wayfinding study, they can decide what they want to put on there. If they want to use green and yellow, because that's Sandy Hook's colors, they can use whatever colors they want. But we feel it's important that Historic Newtown have a sign, because right now there is no way to know that you're going to Newtown.
Borough.
Okay, because I was told Historic Newtown. Everyone told me at the last meeting it was Historic Newtown Sandy Hook Village. So,
I've never heard that before.
okay.
It's lovely though, we like it.
You like it? Would you like to keep it? You can use it.
Historic, I like it.
Borough might need
And
Let the borough do
then,
their own sign.
Say historic Newtown that way, Sandy Hook this way.
And that's exactly it. Sandy Hook with dining and shops is this way. Historic Newtown can put whatever they want hanging down with an arrow going that way. They don't have to use the hook arrow if they don't want to. But we just felt that was an interesting way to connect the two, so that when you get off the exit, you feel like we are part of Newtown, but we're also unique. And then small directional signs, trailblazing signs, etc. Then we have our little parking sign with the hook arrow. So we have the municipal parking and the public the other kind of parking, which we'll discuss. And then this is our kiosk. We did it's a three-legged kiosk, and we did the two sides. One will have a map, and the other will have events and information. You could get those sponsored by businesses, etc. That could help pay for it, etc. QR codes should be on those too. And then we're talking about pavement markings. We feel that that needs to be something you work with Newtown Forest Association and the people that are administering Mass Trail and the town historian. But I think you could come up with all different pavement markings that can go throughout the entire village. These could be things that are added on the new streetscape and also on Dayton Road. Could be something that if we get an agreement with the church, we could put it with the church. We can also get those markers put in such a way on the bridges, etc. And they can be just as fun as these are fun. These are all fun. And this, everybody's seen that if you've done the Freedom Trail in Boston. And then we determined that flowers might be something we only do at the four corners, if we could get someone to water them.
Yeah.
Because dead flowers don't look good. Now, the city of Danbury hires someone to water all the flower baskets on Main Street. I'm still astonished they're doing that. So it would be something where you would have to make an agreement with someone who's taking care of all the landscaping in the village. That's more public landscaping. We'll discuss funding in a minute, but. And then, of course, holiday decorations, which you do already. The thing I really feel you have to get a handle on is these little ribbons that I see on the street light. They're too small, and they look kind of ridiculous. If you're going to put a ribbon on a street light, it has to be a ribbon, not a little tiny ribbon that you buy, in the like Michael's. It has to be a real big, chunky ribbon to be something that. So if we're going to do like red, white, and blue ribbons for the 4th of July or any other kind of ribbons for whatever other event there is, then we need to make sure that the ribbons are substantial size. Your holiday decorations are beautiful, and I think
those are the only time we use ribbons.
Yeah.
No, I went by not too long ago, and there were ribbons on all the.
Oh, purple ones?
That's
That's a cancer, that's a cancer ordinance. That wasn't us.
That wasn't you?
Yeah, they asked our permission, I told them yes, but that was a,
Okay, so then
That's a
we have to
cancel.
give them guidelines that the ribbons have to be.
well, they're standard ribbons, they put them everywhere.
Oh, okay.
But our holiday ribbons are pretty big.
Yeah, they're.
But the other holidays, we only use lights. The only time we use ribbons is at Christmas.
Okay. See, here's our icon. I actually went to see if there's fire hose sculptures. And there are fire hose sculptures. They're in the shape of fire hoses up here, and art, and then Wes had a great idea. Was it Wes? Yeah. He said, why don't we make bicycle racks out of fire hose? I think you really need to emphasize this. Huge draw. There are people that all they do is the whole fire community. And the fact that fire hoses were manufactured until the mid-1970s in Sandy Hook. You also have kept those factories. The dam is still there. The pedestrian bridge is still there. This is a big linkage. And could be a lot of fun. So instead of a flagpole, Sandy Hook has a fire hose.
And it's history we're proud of too.
And its history should be proud of.
Right, to rise to the
I mean, it was from 1850 to 1970, it was defining Sandy Hook Village. It's bigger than hats. I say that because Danbury.
We could make one just straight, put it right in the middle of the road. We'd have,
But that, you know where I was thinking, where the holiday tree is, you know, we could have an artist create, I mean, this is beyond my scope as an artist.
The
but-
old holiday tree.
Sorry?
The old holiday tree?
No, the new holiday tree. You know, so as you come down Churchill Road, you see the holiday tree and then this fire hose. It could be decorated for Christmas, or, I'm sorry, holidays. It could be something really unique and interesting. It could be a fountain, someone said. That was a cute idea, a fire hose fountain. So it has a lot of cachet. And it could be what,
Yeah, you gotta get rid of the building.
and then you could actually create a whole fun marketing campaign with your fire hose.
She had a good one. I did. She said, get hosed in Sandy Hook.
Get hosed and
Start at the vineyard.
you could have the fire hose wine bar, you know? We also want to talk about maps and brochures because although everything's digital, there are a certain amount of people that like an actual print thing. So we are recommending you develop a graphic map. That should be done by a graphic designer. That can be mounted on the kiosk. That could be a downloadable map from the website so that someone could print it out. And it could be handed out around the village as a print item. And it could have businesses sponsoring it to help defray the cost. You want to develop a brochure that highlights all the assets and events in the village. An historical and environmental assets walking tour brochure would be interesting, which would also be attached with QR codes so that you could also put it on your iPhone.
Like, put that out.
Same with the recreational assets. And I think a dining brochure might be interesting. You know, putting together all the dining, the vineyard and the wine bar and all the dining. So that would be an interesting brochure to put together. Someone had a question?
Can you just go back 1 second and show Mike the bike rack?
Oh, the fire hose? You saw this, right? Did you? No.
I didn't know.
Fire hose.
Oh, well, this is the iconic element that we
that was the
at the
icon?
last, the fire hose sculpture. I just Googled fire hose sculpture and up popped these images. There were several others, but I thought these three were the better of the. They actually make a bench out of fire hose, which is kind of cool. Bike rack was attached to the bench out of fire hose, so it's kind of neat. So I think that there's a lot of things we can do with this to kind of really bring to the forefront why Sandy Hook Village is right where Sandy Hook Village is.
I think we can find a sponsor for that rack too.
Yeah. And then maybe work with a Get Hooked on Sandy Hook promotional campaign. I don't know if Get Hosed in Sandy Hook is compelling,
It's a working title.
but it's like Got Milk,
Right,
Okay,
it's
let's do
more
that.
upbeat
And
and.
hose.
I like it a lot.
Get Hooked.
Get hooked on Sandy Hook. It's
You
more
could make it hose
upbeat
down.
and fun.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we, you know what? Sandy Hook was always the place you went to in the old
It's
days.
kind of like the other side of the track.
Yeah, it was the other side where you had fun, you know?
But it's
Yeah, we know,
positive
you
track.
heard you got
I
thrown
chose
out.
to live here,
Yeah,
so
yeah. So let's have fun again.
Right.
That's really what we're trying to do is let's have fun again. I think, to be honest with you, I think everyone who's gone through what you guys have gone through, you deserve to have a little fun. I think the digital guidelines, I think number one, you've got to get that web presence. You've got to get that strong web presence. So you've got to get someone in here who can help you with search engine optimization and all the tools necessary to get that, so that when people Google you, you get the right message out there. You should be controlling the message.
Ask Devin if he wants an internship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Connect to all the Googles. So Google has the places and the digital business sites, interactive maps, virtual tourist, which I think Newtown has a site for, but Sandy Hook is not on. So that's virtualtourist.com, tripadvisor.com, expedia.com, connecticutvisit.com, all these .coms. Compatible with iPhone, Droid, and tablets. In other words, if your website, could I open it up on my phone? I don't want it to be this little tiny thing. I want it to work with my phone. Should work with my tablet. Right now, the Newtown website does not do that. Should be simple and trackable, expandable, and adaptable, responsive to new technologies, and customizable. In other words, you should have a certain amount of ability to put information on it, content management, okay? You shouldn't have to always go and pay someone to have to put it up. You should have someone who's working with you consistently, shop especially, so that if you have an event, you can get it up there easily. QR codes we've discussed. About 5 people said there should be a Sandy Hook Village app. Something you can think about. There's apps for everything. I went to Zion National Park, there was an app. Told me when the sun was going to rise at a certain point. We all ran out there and darned if the sun didn't rise at that time.
Yeah, told it to.
And then you want to link all the businesses to shop. And the businesses should link to shop, and shop should link to the businesses. A couple of the businesses, their names are spelled wrong. You might want to look at them. Just make sure that everybody's name is spelled right. Future recommendations. These are not related to this plan, but these are recommendations we're putting in the plan so that you do them maybe in the future, because this is beyond the Signage Wayfinding plan. Develop a parking plan. And that should be encouraging the property owners to work together. Everyone should work together, because park once is the strategy, it's called. Park once. It's economic development. You get the person to park, and then they walk. And when they walk, they eat, they drink, they spend. If they have to park there and it says you will be towed if you do not move your car, they have to move their car, they're going to go to 84 and get out of Dodge. Okay, park one strategy is something. You also want to get, I believe, back in 2000, 2006, 2012, I believe that on-street parking on Churchill Road would be an important thing to bring back formally to Sandy Hook. I know it's informal, but I think formal on-street parking, people would know that they could park there, and number 2, it's traffic calming. Because the other problem you're having is people speeding down that hill, and everybody feels it's so wide, they feel they can just go as fast as they can. I saw people doing, they had to be doing 60 miles an hour down that hill. Develop a river walk. We have the starts of a river walk. To Mr. Porco's credit, he sees that as an asset. I think everyone should see that as an asset. A river walk, you have an opportunity for a river walk. Mr. Porco's other property is not really geared for a river walk, but should be. And this whole idea of getting people to the river to walk, dine, sit, contemplate, it's just a beautiful view. When you stand in the middle of the pedestrian bridge by Sabrina's, I call it the Sabrina's pedestrian bridge and the Dayton Road pedestrian bridge, you think you're in the middle of Vermont, and then you turn around and you see the dumpster. So we need to really talk about that. But the Riverwalk, I think, would be an incredible asset. The brownfield site could potentially be a municipal parking area and a pocket park. That was not my idea, but I think I got to give credit where credit is due. I believe George came up with most of it, and then Bob came up with some of it. But I think it's a great idea. And it could provide parking for Al's Trail, because then we could connect streetscape to the pedestrian bridge, over the pedestrian bridge into Al's Trail. And then it could come down into the village, goes
Or we could
through.
do another pedestrian bridge directly across from that is town properties, open space,
Okay,
on the other side of the bridge, directly
Yes.
across from that brownfield.
okay. So, that would be even better. Yeah. Continue to implement the market and branding study, get hooked on Sandy Hook. We talked about promote a greater collaborative role with Newtown. I think there's certain, like the Arts Festival. The Arts Festival should also include Sandy Hook. You had a concert while the Arts Festival was going on, but it wasn't part of the Arts Festival.
It was last year.
Why wasn't it this year?
I don't know.
Say that again?
We need a more collaborative role between Newtown and Sandy Hook on events. Like, for argument's sake, they had a concert this year that was on during the Arts Festival, but it wasn't part of the Arts Festival. It should have been part of the Arts Festival. The Arts Festival should also have venues in Sandy Hook.
They did
The-
last year.
The farmer's market was in Sandy Hook, moved to Fairfield Hills. I'm recommending it come back to Sandy Hook and the whole entire Sandy Hook become the venue for the farmer's market. In other words, have every week, have venues all through Sandy Hook selling, so people stroll through Sandy Hook and they can get their organic produce, their jams, their jellies, whatever, and then they can also stop at Sabrina's and buy a prom dress.
Did the duck race do that this year, Joe?
Well, we tried to get it a little more
To
involved
scatter
in
it
the
around the
village,
village, yeah.
And we did try to do it with the farmer's market once before too. I think there was an issue, parking, a couple other things there. that
Well,
they
parking,
didn't want
once
to
we
do.
get,
Yeah,
once
they
we
didn't
get
want
the
to do it.
parking study done, parking won't be an issue.
The farmer's market never really had an on-street place to go. They
Yeah.
were
Where to put
behind
it.
Workos or
Yeah.
behind the church, and nobody could ever see them.
Right.
Yeah, so I think if we
Okay.
could bring them out to the street,
Mhm.
make them have a street presence, then they park in, the church is willing for events to have people park there. You can park all through the village, and then people walk the village to all the various venues, then you've got, the whole village becomes the farmer's market. Should also reach out to the regional organizations, like your concert should be promoted through the Western Connecticut Cultural Alliance, would have been a good thing.
It was promoted through a ton of places.
But keep working with all your regional, because what we are seeing is that Sandy Hook is not a weekend destination place specifically, but the Housatonic region has several places that could be destination places, and Sandy Hook could be one of them. Like you could spend a day in Sandy Hook, a day in Bethel, a day in Ridgefield, and that's 3 days in beautiful Connecticut. And all three downtowns are gorgeous. And then we really feel strongly that a public relations plan, and you may already have this in place, but we have to manage the message, because there's going to be anniversaries and there's going to be the opening of the school. And how are you dealing with that? So when we talked about that at the workshop the last time, there didn't seem to be any, and maybe you already have decided this, but we have to plan for this. And these are recommendations beyond the wayfinding plan, but the wayfinding plan certainly can alleviate some of the physical issues of these types of events. In other words, providing people understanding of where they should park, where they should walk, etc. So we're going to go into implementation. You have SHOP, wonderful. They should spearhead and monitor the implementation of the Signage Wayfinding plan, with Newtown Economic Development Commission and the town of Newtown assisting SHOP in implementation and funding. Should involve all the stakeholders through the entire implementation process. So in other words, every time you want to implement the plan, it should be notified to the stakeholders. It's up to them to come, that you're going to do that, and how everything is going to be managed. There are some codes that are, and we're putting the codes into the appendix, but there are some codes that maybe need a little tweaking to adjust for Sandy Hook. So we think we're not going to get the Connecticut DOT or the Federal Highway to adjust their codes, but maybe we can do a little tweaking on Newtown. All permits need to be reviewed by Connecticut DOT and the town and Newtown agencies. In other words, you need an encroachment permit from the Connecticut DOT to put up any sign. It's encroachment of their right-of-way, so you have to do that. And then you also need to get permits from the town to put up signs. So very important that you understand that you just don't put up signs and then someone comes out and gives you a cease and desist. And SHOP in the town of Newtown should fund and implement a comprehensive maintenance strategy. Okay, let's talk about that. Funding. First of all, there's been several federal and state grants for streetscape. Number one, safety improvements. There's a huge amount of federal money now for safety improvements, specifically on signage. It's on the Federal Highway website. Like you said, there's a grant for everything. Accessible route improvements, another funding source, because there's a whole new set of regulations on accessible routes that have come in. ProWag has come in. I don't know if you've heard of those terms, but anyway, accessible route is huge now, and there's funding for that. And economic development through DECD. Then there's deep grants for interpretive signs and kiosks. They get them from EPA. You have to be specific to their specific requirements, but we can always tweak that. We've gotten DEP grants for butterfly gardens. We've gotten DEP grants for dredging a pond, so you can get grants through DEP. Although they have had major budget cuts, so not sure how much grants they have, but sometimes they're small, like 10, 15,000, but sometimes that can pay for a couple of interpretive signs. Research tax incremental funding, the TIF, or special tax district, determine if Sandy Hook Village is a candidate for this kind of structure. I know Betsy's in the process of doing that. That's talking about actually creating a tax district, and that can be done several different ways. Local environmental groups, such as the Newtown Forest Association puts up signage, such as the Trout Unlimited people put up signage. Work with them so that the signage actually works with Sandy Hook Village too. There's no reason why their kiosk can't say, if you're hungry, just go that way. There's nothing about the village on their sign. Local private grants for interpretive and historic signs. We've gotten a lot of money out of Meserve in the past. I think Meserve is a good resource. They're in Norwalk, but they usually fund things in the Houstonic region. George will tell you we got a lot of money from Meserve for a particular project that George and I worked on many years ago when his daughter was in a car seat. Banks and larger corporations and even Starbucks have a certain amount of grant programs. We've gotten a lot of money from Savings Bank of Danbury. I'm sure Newtown Savings has a grant program, especially for interpretive and historic and educational signage. That is where you will get that kind of money. Eagle Scout projects and Girl Scout projects. Rotary clubs. Sponsorships of signs. Local service clubs in Danbury sponsor a lot of the gateway signs in Danbury, so it wouldn't be out of line that we could get some service clubs to sponsor some of the signs here and some of the businesses. And then, of course, there's some capital improvements, and there may be some capital improvement funding for the streetscapes, etc. Maintenance. Number one thing with maintenance is if the Public Works Department is going to be involved, involve them early. Do not say it afterwards, hey, take care of this sign. Get them out there before you're putting the signs in and say, listen, we're going to have you involved in this. You want materials that are easily repaired. There's going to be a list of that in the appendix. Parts that are interchangeable. You don't want to use foreign parts. Have a lot of interchangeable parts and brackets and screws and everything so that if they go to one sign, they can use there's not like, okay, this sign takes this screw and that sign takes that. All the screws should be the same size. Develop a yearly maintenance strategy and monitor its success. That's probably going to be shop's job or someone from shop, because basically you really want to know if this is not being maintained and why isn't it being maintained, and then have a liaison to the Public Works Department or whoever, the town of Newtown, or maybe you want to have them privately maintained, but you then have to find funding to do that. Understand that the lifespan of a sign is about 10 to 15 years if they don't get hit by a car. Okay? So they're not a forever thing, you know? In 10 or 15 years, you're going to be doing this again. And you should also consider that 10% of the cost of the sign should be dedicated to its maintenance in that 10 to 15 years. So you really shouldn't consider that the sign is just going to be a one-shot deal. The wind, the snow, the birds do some real damage to some signs. There's the Welcome to Sandy Hook sign by Figs. Some bird has been, woodpecker actually, went at it really hard. Okay. And then you have to appoint an entity that would be responsible for the yearly management of the sign maintenance. So that should be the point person. Who's going to be responsible for this? Because if you don't have someone responsible, then everybody just goes, their job. So in conclusion, right on time. Sandy Hook is a destination. It's got key attractions, it's got mobility, it's got linkages. It's got everything. I mean, Sandy Hook's a great place. I said that the first day I came here in 2000 and stood on that corner in the middle of January. This is amazing. And I had never been here up until that point. So, and it was my love affair, started right then. I said, oh my God, how could you have this wonderful village? And look how far we've come in 15 years. The streetscape should be expanded, because the more walkable and the more strolling you have, the better off you are. And we've identified all the linkages. So I think it's pretty clear that that is something that will increase the wayfinding, but also increase the marketability of the village. But this is only one tool. So we really want you to understand that this is just one tool in the toolbox. We recommend the parking study and maybe a master plan, which really will identify what Sandy Hook wants to be. But if you asked me, and even if you don't ask me, I give my opinion, I think that when I saw all the recreational assets and I saw the history of this place, we talked about at the last workshop that the number one reason why people come to the state of Connecticut as tourists is for history, and the second is for environmental and recreational assets. You have all three right here in this little village. I mean, there's no reason why you shouldn't be promoting that and really telling the world that this is the place to come, to visit, to shop, to dine, to drink wine, to hike, to fish, to ride your bicycle, to live, to work, to play. People should want to live here.
I think I just told Jane earlier, I was talking to Chris Hodis yesterday about Sandy Hook, and I asked him, what does he see Sandy Hook to be? And he said a place to live, work, and play. And it kind of wraps it all up. It's our urban center of Newtown.
And I just want to show you that we will have an appendix that'll have all this information in it. Okay, I said I'd have 15 minutes for any comments, and it is 20 to 8.
Good, Jane.
Good job.
Thank you. Brian?
Of course, I'm going to say something. I was holding my comments to the end, not to interrupt you. Just want to say it's been a pleasure working with you in the last 6 meetings. I think you've done a fantastic job. I just wanted to thank everyone here for their input. I just didn't want anyone to lead for unrealistic expectations with respect to understanding we have a lot of great resources. I just took my family to Elstrel this weekend. Didn't work out because of sicknesses, et cetera, birthday party. But as an economic-based generator, multiplier, you look at the market and the density is just not there. So with respect to some of the comments from a retail perspective, the town will have to incubate some office and industrial uses to then have that residential base, to then have that retail base. But it will come. We are progressing, we're moving forward, we're leasing space. But I want to make a comment about the signage, because that's something that we deal with every day. And I mentioned it before at one of the meetings, was tenants always want to see their name on a rider. And I agree with you 100%. And we work in 169 municipalities. And municipalities often change zoning regulations to allow sign riders, or sometimes to prohibit them after having them. What happens is, a town like Newtown, because it's a secondary town from an office industrial standpoint. So what you have is you have tenants, mostly startups, for the smaller spaces, and they're very interested in seeing their name on a shingle. So what happens is you'll have competing properties in Bethel, Newtown, and Monroe. And if other towns give tenants the ability to have a rider, they may gravitate to that town. So I think I cautioned last time, I would urge the P&Z Commission, or whoever's going to be responsible for spearheading the signage, Two, I agree with you 100% to have that destination monument, like 107 107 Churchill Road, that square. That square. But we will see, as Mike knows, as a client, that we've had this issue with tenants, and that's an ongoing
And
concern.
I don't disagree, because I have a sign on 70 North Street in Danbury, and if you go by there, you'll see my little Dodona Associates land, not so little, I'm the biggest one on the sign, so I'm very proud of that. Dodona Associates Landscape Architects, see? But I have a traffic light right there. So at the traffic light, they're sitting there and they say, oh, Dodona Associates, okay? If it wasn't for the traffic light, no one would see that. No, my point is that really, I'm not saying don't put the riders in, but make them so they're a little more also pedestrian friendly, but don't diminish, in other words, make that address so people can see it. So that might have to be working with the town to make sure that the height of the, but if it's, what are you, 107 Churchill Road? 107 should be prominent, because when I'm in the car and I have to make a quick decision, you know how the GPS is. It says, turn right now. Whoa, whoa, whoa. You know?
But it also says recalculating.
I turned mine off.
Mine says that all blocked.
I turned mine off. But, you know, frankly, the 107 is important because I've punched that into my GPS. So I need to know that 107 is, and sometimes they make a mistake. They'll say 107's on the right and 107's really on the left. I yell at her when that happens. She's a she, by the way.
Yeah, mine is too.
I just want to make an observation about how far we've come in such a short period of time. I know the first phase of the streetscape was that done in 2000?
No, the master plan to get the funding.
Right.
Yeah.
So when, in 2010, when we were still struggling with the telephone pole at the intersection of Riverside Road and Glen, and, you know, that was in 2010. So understand that we were able to find the funding and work with the utilities and do a lot of, you know, back office kind of work to get that done. Everyone said it will never happen, that it's going to cost $1 million, we'll never do it. In fact, we got it done without any town money. That was George and Fred Hurley and I figured out how we can make that happen. So I guess I just want to share that. That was just in 2010. So we completed that work, I think it was in 2011. So really, it's something that I think we should remember when we remind ourselves that all things are possible.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't, we have a long way to go. I think there are some big things like the brownfield, the parking area, the possibility for that brownfield area. I think those are the things that George and I kind of have focused on as our #1 thing for next year. But I think that there are other things that other people can gravitate to and help us accomplish. Like the focus on the recreational aspects, you know, certainly working with Trout Unlimited, working with Newtown Forest Association, working with all the recreation groups to figure out how to create information and appropriate signage and access to those recreational opportunities. I think we can kind of kick off some of these responsibilities to other folks.
I agree.
I would prefer a master plan for Sandy Hook Village. You know, that would address all of these issues. I just don't know where the money for a master plan would come from.
There may be an opportunity.
There's a grant, a Connecticut Main Street grant opportunity that we could do.
For master planning?
Yep.
We've already started the master plan committee, which was
Yes.
part of part of the plan that we came up with Connecticut Main Street. We've had
Yeah,
several
okay,
meetings, and it's a good group. And I've also started partnering and to help with some of the funding committee, which is also a good group. We've kind of been waiting for this to finalize to get that one really rolling. It's some of the same people that are on both groups. But the master plan committee has been working with Bob Eckert Newton Forest Association and a few other groups, and we're well on the way. George is on it, Betsy's on it, Mike and I, a couple realtors, a couple
Good.
bankers, and, you know, miscellaneous people.
In the
like that.
meantime, we're going to continue to focus on the brownfield because that's the work that
Yeah, that's
we're doing
huge.
right now.
And you know, frankly, this plan, when I hand it to you next week, in a compiled form in a PDF, okay, it's probably the final form of the wayfinding may change based on all the things you're going to do after, but that's okay. Because this process which we started all the way back in May, has really brought out all the wonders of this village to everyone's forefront. And that is, I think, I like doing plans more for the process than the actual book. Because I think process really gets people energized.
Well, that's another key right there. Hopefully that does, because the biggest issue with all those things you had on the list for shop to do, most of the things that get done by shop are done by the people that are in this room from
Yeah.
shop, which is 3 or 4 of us.
And
So that's gotta change or none of this is gonna happen.
yeah, that's a huge issue.
Relationships.
Yeah, and that's where Betsy can help you too, because I think it's economic development and shop and the property and business owners need to understand that if you have a strong organization, you will have business, and business means profits.
Everybody has the same objective, it's great.
Good, is there any other
Everybody
comments?
here does.
Yeah. Betsy, that Main Street grant, is that 10,000 grant again?
It goes from 2 to 10.
2 to 10?
Yeah, so we can apply for 10. I can talk to Kimberly about it.
So Jane, do you think 10,000 is a reasonable amount for a master plan?
No,
No.
I think 5 times,
5 times that?
Or 10.
or 10.
Quality.
I to be honest with you, when I did the Richter Park master plan, which was just Richter Park, I was $100,000 master plan.
So is a $10,000 grant more attuned to parking study than a master plan?
I think that's light for a parking study. To be honest with you, 10,000 was light for this study, very light, but this is also my gift to you. Because you guys have been part of my life for a long time.
You might be able to tease out one of the major themes and apply the 10,000 to that. So maybe developing a marketing plan around the recreational.
That could be.
So really focus that
On the niche.
plan, but
Right.
it really is not nowhere nearly enough to do a master plan.
No.
Well, hopefully the
But
master plan
it can
committee,
do a little, a piece of it.
Yeah.
hopefully the master plan committee can get a lot of it put together at any cost.
Yeah.
I'd hope we would start to get money to implement things instead of doing more plans to tell you the
Right,
truth.
and that's what I
That's
was
why
we're at
you
the
and I
point-
need to convene
Yeah.
the work that we're doing.
And I think it was you who said at one of our master plan
I
committee
did.
tours that we don't really need a parking study. We know the
We
parking
need to
problem. We
get
need a
money
parking
to
lot,
build
not a
things.
parking study.
There we go.
And we kind of know where,
But I think
Exactly.
what.
trying to make
I
it
think
happen.
what-
Exactly, so
I think
take
what
that 10 grand from the study.
Connecticut Main
not
Street,
the-
I do not think gives money for implementation, I may be wrong.
No.
They're only planning grants, right?
So
Yeah,
the planning
planning,
grant.
yeah.
So if you do get a money for a planning grant, then I think you should focus in on it. Maybe 10,000 would be enough to get a traffic engineer to convince whoever the powers that be to get the on-street parking onto Churchill
Well,
Road.
we've already planned that, it's just the police commissioner would want us to.
So what do we
It was
need?
in the
Well,
plan.
and we actually have one of the police commission on our
Actually, Michael
group,
Lente
he's
and I
talking
laid it
to-
out for,
Yeah, it was on your
it's
plan.
on my plan, yeah.
It was approved by
Yeah.
P&Z and then just.
We'd have to find those plans.
Right, we have parking
I
on the
have-
street, we
Yeah.
have on-street parking that's approved too, they just won't pay me. Right?
Well, no,
In front of
the
liquor
police
store.
commission.
Those were
In front of the
approved.
liquor
No, the police
store.
commission would not
They
allow
would-
it.
The police commission said.
But I thought they approved it, but then that
No,
former police commissioner wouldn't actually paint the lines. It was approved.
We approved it,
Right.
P&Z. The
I
No,
think the
police
police
P&Z
commission approved it too.
No, it wasn't.
I don't think
It was
so.
the
I think it
P&Z,
was.
I was there, so it was the
Yeah.
P&Z commission approved it.
Mhm.
We all were going forward with it.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, the police commission said, no, you're denied. So we had
Right.
to, and that was a problem because we had taken.
You
Yeah,
should try
yeah,
again,
that's
not
you
what I
should
heard.
try again.
I heard that it was approved, but then, what's her name, who
I
was the
thought it was
commissioner,
approved.
wouldn't let us paint the lines.
That's what I'm saying, at some point, the police commission said we couldn't, I don't know if they approved it, then they said no, but they were the
I
ones who
was
said
at the
we can't
meeting.
do it.
Well, it was one of the one, this was a long
Yeah.
time ago.
It was a long time ago.
It was when, what's her name?
Jane, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, every development in every city and every market today is all about destination, all about recreation. So growing up in this community, I mean, we have an asset that we haven't leveraged. Obviously, Connecticut, we have our challenges with respect to business staying and maintaining and growing in Connecticut, all of us. But having the asset and really focusing and allowing egress and flow, because you really made a very important point, which I don't know if everyone in the room knows that, but national retailers, the reason why they spend an enormous amount of money to be at a traffic light, I mean, you can see your shingle, is for that ease of egress and the ability for people for people, to be able to conveniently pull off, grab that prescription for that sick family member, a couple needs, and get back and get home and take care of what they have to do. So in the formation, I'm glad to hear that the parking, George, we know we have an issue, so I'm glad to hear that we want to do something about it, and Pat as well. Making that is the egress as easy as possible, because it's called psychographics. You hit the nail on the head. Why people spend money, the art of why people spend money. And when some things are clean, and when they're inviting, when they're landscaped, when they're weeded, when they have fresh flowers, little things like that, believe it or not, make people stay longer, feel comfortable, they spend money, and then they want to live in the community, and then they want to be an entrepreneur and start a business in the community, and that really grows the economic base.
And I believe the way they do, like, I just did this in my own business, where I've got the whole network set up that I can actually sit on my deck at home and actually access my network at my office at 70 North Street. So that I have now gotten into, what, 20th century or the 21st? But frankly, I think that's the way of the future. Yeah.
Well, we don't want people sitting on the deck, we want them down here.
In our park.
Well, for lunch.
They'll be in Mike Burton's
Complex.
complex,
The walk.
and they'll walk for lunch.
No,
I think the way business is going to be done, I think in 20 years, you're not even going to recognize how business is going to be done. Because just think 20 years ago, we didn't have GPS, we didn't have iPhones. My 1994 cell phone, you actually had to pull up the antenna,
Mine
and
was in
you
a
couldn't
bag.
carry it in your purse. That's 20 years ago I had that phone.
Mine was a purse. It was,
Yeah.
it was in a bag. The battery was bigger than the phone. Remember those things? It was in a bag.
That's 20 years. Now, if you go from now to 2035, when we have the next lunar eclipse, the business is going to be totally different. Totally different. And yet, when I stand here, does 1995 seem that long ago?
Yes. Sadly, yes and no.
Yes.
So, frankly, I want to thank you again for this wonderful
Well done.
experience. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Very worthwhile.
Great, thank you.
So we'll have this on a video clip.